Toronto, May 1947. Christina Brooke Mallard had never fit inside her mother's house. The wallpaper pressed too close. The floorboards whispered her name when no one walked on them. There were too many photographs and none of them changed. Even when she moved them, they found their way back. At 22, she still sat like a guest at the dinner table. She still asked permission to go outside. Then, one evening, she simply vanished. 2 weeks later, she returned wearing a pale blue dress stained at the hem with river mud. Her hair was uncombed. Her eyes were dull but wide. She carried no suitcase. "I'm married," she said calmly. "His name is Jack." Jack Kettlewell was 38, a quiet war veteran with broad shoulders and a permanent squint, like he was always bracing for something to fall from the sky. They had no wedding photo, no ceremony, just matching rings and a certificate signed in a town 2 hours north that no one remembered visiting. And trailing just behind them, as though part of their shadow, came Ronald Barry. Barry was everything Jack wasn't: charming, eccentric, loud with his hands. He introduced himself as a family friend, though no one knew whose family he meant. He was a ballroom dancer, he said, with a studio in Toronto and a cottage on the Severn River. It was that cottage he offered them, as a honeymoon gift, as a gesture of goodwill. Christina's family objected. They didn't trust Jack. They distrusted Barry more, but she wouldn't listen. Her letters had grown strange lately, fragmented, poetic, with long silences between lines. "I want to feel something new," she said before she left. "Something no one else has touched." They departed 3 days later in a pale green car. No one waved goodbye. The cottage was deep in the forest, past Oro Station, nearly hidden in a curve of the river where the banks turned black with silt. It had once been a fishing shack, expanded over the decades by someone with no plan. It sagged in the center. The roof leaked when it rained. The cellar was nailed shut with 3 iron bars. Inside, it smelled of lye tobacco and the ghosts of old damp firewood. There were no closets, only rusted hooks on the walls. The bed creaked before anyone touched it. The windows wouldn't open. There were scratches along the door frames, as if something had once tried to get out. Jack unpacked their bags with a soldier's precision. Christina wandered from room to room, tracing her fingers along the walls. Barry arrived the next morning uninvited, carrying a bottle of champagne and a notebook filled with cut-out newspaper clippings, mostly about tragic drownings, collapsed churches, and unsolved fires in the woods. "You'll love it here," Barry said, grinning. "The water's deeper than it looks." Christina stared at him. She didn't smile. That night, she heard humming from beneath the floorboards. Day 1. The honeymoon began in silence. Christina sat at the window watching the river crawl past like something asleep. It was spring, but the trees around the cottage were bare. Not in the way of winter, but like something had stripped them slowly. Jack chopped wood. He didn't speak unless she asked something directly. Barry was everywhere and nowhere, humming in the hallway, clicking his nails on the kitchen table, leaving behind empty teacups even when no one saw him drink. There was no electricity, only candles. At night, Christina would lie awake, listening to the wind curl through the beams and floorboards. Sometimes she'd hear a faint scraping under the bed, but Jack would say it was mice or her imagination. She stopped asking. Day 3. They found a letter under the mattress, folded carefully, sealed with black wax. The handwriting was tight, angular. Christina opened it without hesitation. "To the next keeper of this place, do not stay past the 7th day. It will remember you. Burn your name before the moon returns. They do not forgive the echo of vows." There was no signature, no date. Jack threw it into the fireplace, but the flame wouldn't catch. That night, Christina dreamed of a staircase spiraling underground. Not inside the house, but inside herself. She woke up crying and didn't know why. Barry stood at the foot of the bed, watching them in the candlelight. "Some dreams come down through the bones," he said softly. "You can't cure what's inherited." Day 5. The cellar door was no longer nailed shut. Jack swore he didn't remove the bars. Barry claimed it had always been unlocked. Christina descended only once. The steps were stone damp, covered in mildew. At the bottom was a shallow square room with a dirt floor and nothing inside, except a ring of old nails embedded into the wall. On one of them hung a child's shoe, blackened with age. In the far corner was a heap of ashes and something that looked like melted wax. She couldn't breathe. The air was thick, like candle smoke and sulfur. She climbed back up and never returned. Day 6. Barry set up a record player on the table. It didn't need electricity. Christina didn't ask how it worked. He played old ballroom tunes from the 1910s, and when the melody bent at strange angles, he smiled wider. Some places hold on to songs, he said. Even when the music dies. Jack began muttering in his sleep. Christina watched him one night, lips moving silently, then violently, as if his dreams had turned to ash in his mouth. He called out names she didn't know: Esther, Delia, Father Ridge. Barry wouldn't explain. Instead, he brought out an old book, bound in green leather, the edges warped from moisture. It wasn't in English. The letters curled like roots. Christina touched the pages and felt a vibration in her ribs. "There was a bride before you," Barry whispered. "You wear her shadow well." Day 7. The sky darkened at noon. Christina stood by the riverbank, holding her wedding ring in one hand. Her other hand bled slightly from where she had been picking at the skin again. A woman was watching her from across the river, not moving, pale as bone, wearing the same blue dress. When she blinked, the woman was gone. She returned to the cottage to find Jack staring into the fire, whispering numbers. Barry had set the table for 3 and poured red wine, though Christina could smell copper instead of grapes. "This was the night," Barry said, "when the first bride went into the water." Christina trembled. What happened to her? Barry tilted his head. She remembered too much. Day 8. Christina woke to water in the bed. Not blood, not spilled tea, cold river water, a spreading, shimmering pool that soaked into the sheets and climbed up her spine like fingers. Jack didn't move. His face was turned toward the window, eyes wide open but unseeing. His mouth hung slightly open as if mid-sentence. But he wasn't breathing. Panicked, she reached for him, and he blinked. He gasped and rolled away like a man pulled from drowning. He wouldn't explain. Wouldn't speak for hours. That morning, she found damp footprints circling the bed, small, bare, child-sized. The cottage groaned in the wind like it was remembering something painful. Afternoon, Barry took her down to the riverbank again. He spoke in half-finished phrases, distracted, humming to himself between words. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with black as if bruised from within. "I thought you'd break by day 6, he said with a smile. "But you carry the weight well, just like she did." "Ooh," Christina asked. "Christina," he said, looking straight at her. "You?" "I am Christina." "Yes," Barry said, smile widening. "And you were too." She stepped back. The river behind him bubbled quietly, as though something just under the surface had exhaled. Barry reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same blackened shoe she'd seen in the cellar. "You were always meant to come back." A nightfall. The record player began playing on its own. Waltz music, warped slow like bones bending in rhythm. The fire burned blue. Jack sat with his back to her, motionless, staring at the hearth. Christina approached, slowly. She placed her hand on his shoulder. He whispered, "My father told me what they did here." I didn't believe him. She knelt in front of him. "What did they do?" He looked up at her, finally, and there was something not right behind his eyes. "They used the first wives," he said, "to keep the river from taking the children. Every generation, one marriage, one offering, one bride beneath the water." She stepped back, hard in her throat. "You knew," she whispered. Jack nodded slowly. "I thought if it was love it wouldn't take you." Later that night, she found a letter she had written, in her own handwriting. But the date was wrong. It was dated 1933. It was addressed to her future self. "You are not the first, Christina, but you are the last. When he brings you here, ask what he left behind the hearth. Ask what he burned. Ask whose name he forgot. Then run, before the clocks restart." She turned to confront Jack, but found Barry instead seated by the fire, drinking from an empty glass. "You never wrote that," he said gently. "But she did." "Who?" "The one who drowned." Christina clenched her fists. Her fingers were bleeding. She hadn't even realized she'd been scratching at the skin again. Barry stood. He towered over her now. "They say the water forgets what the fire consumes. But sometimes it remembers." He handed her a small square of burnt fabric, lace, once white, now scorched. "Check behind the hearth," he whispered. Midnight. Christina pushed aside the logs. The stone was loose. Behind it, wrapped in oilcloth and scorched pages, was a wedding ring that wasn't hers. A child's locket. A charred piece of legal parchment marriage certificate. 1933. Ronald Barry and Christina M. LeClaire. She stumbled back. Her mouth went dry. Same name. Different year. Same location. Jack entered, slow and stiff as though something were holding his limbs. "She drowned, didn't she?" Christina asked. Jack didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the window. Outside, the river shimmered. glowing faintly in the moonlight like it remembered its dead. The clocks all stopped at once. The record needle snapped. The front door burst open, not with wind but memory. A warm summer smell from another life, and standing in the doorway was a woman in a soaked blue dress. Her face was Christina's, but older, hollowed. "I told you," she said, voice trembling like wet branches. "We always come back, early morning." Christina could no longer tell whether she was awake or asleep. She stood at the edge of the river again, barefoot in her wedding dress, though she didn't remember putting it on. The mist rolled across the water like a living thing, and she swore she saw faces beneath the surface. Not drowning watching. Jack was behind her, barefoot as well, dirt-streaked, eyes sunken. He reached for her hand. "I tried," he whispered. "I thought if I didn't say the words it wouldn't count." "What words?" Jack's voice cracky. "Till death do us part." In a sepia-toned hallway that smelled of wax and mildew, Christina stood outside a door labeled, "Vows." She entered. Her mother was inside, or someone who wore her mother's face. "You came here once before," the woman said. "You asked what made love last." Christina tried to speak but found her mouth sewn shut. The woman turned to a mirror. In it, Christina saw herself in dozens of timelines. Drowning, burning, dancing, praying, screaming, always wearing the same blue dress, always ending on the 8th day. The woman whispered, "You have to end it before it begins." Barry was in the attic. Christina found him there, arranging small objects in a circle, a bone ring, a burnt ribbon, a child's drawing, a cracked locket. "This is the 7th ritual," he said, not looking up. "The others failed. The names change but the shape stays the same." He showed her a photograph, 5 brides, all with her face, taken decades apart. "You were never supposed to remember," he said. Christina stepped back, horror blooming inside her chest like ink in water. Barry took her hand gently. "Do you want to know the real curse?" She didn't answer. He smiled, thin and tired. "It's not that the bride dies. It's that she returns, over and over." The cottage began to rot in fast motion. Wallpaper peeled. Floorboards curled. The walls breathed. The candle spat smoke. Jack held Christina's face in his hands. "I didn't know you were her again," he said. "I swear to you, I thought this time would break the cycle. Why didn't you tell me?" He looked down. "Because you would have left." Then, gently, "Because I loved you." The room exploded in flickering candlelight. The front door cracked down the middle. Barry screamed from the attic. "It's too soon," he cried. "She hasn't chosen yet the true ritual." Christina descended the stairs, this time not to the cellar, but into memory itself. The door below had no handle, no key, just a name carved into the wood, Christina Mallard, B 1922D. She opened it. Inside was a wedding reception, frozen in time, guests made of smoke, a priest with a missing face. A wedding cake rotted through with moss, and at the altar a girl who looked like her crying. "I don't want to go in the river," the girl said. "You already have," Christina whispered. "Hundreds of times." She approached the girl, took her hand. "You can come out now," she said. "You don't have to do this again." The lights blew out. Day 9's the impossible day. Christina woke on the riverbank alone. The cottage was gone, just blackened earth where it once stood. Her wedding ring had cracked down the middle. She looked into the river and saw no reflection, just water, just silence. Doll, you think a ritual is just a ceremony, but the real ones, they're stories. Stories you believe so deeply, they rewrite the world. I believed I was a bride. I believed love would save me. I believed it ended in water. Tanger now. I believe nothing, and nothing, finally, believes me back. Christina wandered into town at sunrise. But something was wrong. The signs were wrong. Severn Falls was now called Mallard Hollow. The post office was boarded up. The church bell rang, but no one came out. The roads twisted in impossible angles, looping back to where she'd started. Every person she met had a familiar face, like distorted copies of people she once knew. Eyes too wide, smiles too soft. They nodded at her but never spoke. She tried to call for help. The phone only played static, and beneath it, whispering. Bride of the river, bring back the name. Bride of the 8th, let the water reclaim Bordeaux. Christina broke into the town archives. An old schoolhouse with stained glass windows and a floor warped by time. In the basement, buried under old hymnals and rotting birth ledgers, she found the real marriage records. There had been 6 Christinas before her, and then her. All women with the same middle name. All married within 8 days of vanishing from their homes. All dead or missing by the 9th. A marginal note on each certificate read, confirmed for binding, accepted, cycle maintained, river quiet. She backed away and tripped over something metal. It was an urn, label a Kirsha and a K next to it, another Fürstian M and another. She ran. The church without a god. She found Jack in the burned-out chapel. He was kneeling where the altar used to be, surrounded by candles that dripped upward. "You broke it," he said softly. "The cycle's ending now, but nothing survives the ending." Christina stood in the doorway. "What was I? A sacrifice?" "You were hope," he whispered. "That maybe if someone loved enough it wouldn't need blood." He looked at her then, his eyes wet, terrified. "But I was wrong. It never wanted love." Christina approached the pulpit. There, carved in the wood, was the true prayer of the ritual. "Bride of water, bride of name, walk the eighth, return the same." She took the lighter from Jack's coat, set the prayer on fire. The entire church groaned like it was alive, as if some buried god had finally stirred. The sky cracked. Rain began to fall upward. Christina stood at the riverbank one last time, dressed not in white, but in black, a mirror of the other brides, her face streaked with ash and fury. Barry was already waist deep in the water, eyes glowing faintly. "It won't let you go," he called. "Not unless you give it something new." She looked at the urns, one for each version of her, all kept, all returned, and she understood. The river didn't want her to die. It wanted her to remember. It wanted her to choose. So she turned away, and for the first time in the story, she walked back, not into the river, not into the flame, but out. It rained for 8 days straight in Severn Falls. The cottage's foundations were found, unearthed by a flash flood. Beneath them 6 wedding rings, 1 cracked locket, and a child's shoe burned beyond recognition. Jack Kettlewell was never seen again. Ronald Barry was found wandering along the railway tracks, speaking only in old hymns. And Christina, she rented a small apartment in Ottawa under a different name. No mirrors, no visitors, no clocks. But every morning, she places a bowl of water on her windowsill and watches it ripple, waiting. They say the river no longer sings at night. They say no more brides have gone missing. But I don't believe that, because some stories don't end when the water is still. Some stories end only when someone refuses to forget. And I remember everything.